Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We see my lovely colleague, Steph Nurbeck, is here with us today. I'm Danielle Bursk. We're with the New Jersey State Council on the Arts. We are excited to talk to you today about our community-based art grant program that's done in partnership with the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection. I want to say welcome and thank you to the representatives for our community organizations who are with us here today. And later on in the in the hour, we will be able to take some questions and get some answers directly from the hosts who will be hosting the artists who are selected. So I gave you the welcome slide. We're going to move through a really quick PowerPoint here. I just want to talk with you briefly about the goals of the program and the overview. We're going to touch on using Cafe and walk through that part really quickly. And then we're going to open it up for questions from the attendees here today. One last quick reminder, if you haven't muted yourselves, to please do so because everyone can hear you. And we'll get started. So who are we? These are the two major partners in this program, the New Jersey State Council on the Arts and the State Department of Environmental Protection. Both of us are agencies of state government in the state of New Jersey. The State Arts Council is the largest funder of the arts in New Jersey. And the Department of Environmental Protection is a huge agency that does lots of things. Alexandria, do you want to give a quick, 10-second speech about what the DEP does?
Sure. So the Department of Environmental Protection is the agency in the state that handles all of our environmental protection regulation. I'm a part of the coastal management program within the Climate Resilience Office, and we work with NOAA to manage this grant.
Sorry, I couldn't find my unmute button there. Perfect, and thank you. So we are been partnering on this program with the DEP for 5 years now. We actually started just before the pandemic, excitedly rolling this program out, had to put the brakes on things for a little while and then picked it back up, and we get better at it every year. It's something we're really, really excited about because we find that it offers opportunities for artists to do work with organizations throughout the state, but also to speak about climate resilience and to feel supported in doing community engaged work around really important themes. I want to point out here our partners. We do have representatives in the room with us today. Our partners, we call them CBOs, which is a community-based organization. These partners were selected through a competitive application process that the DEP administered to select the partners who receive the funding and get matched with artists to do this work this year. So that process happens earlier. Once the partners are selected, we meet with them, we talk with them about their hopes and dreams and desires for working with an artist, which then informs the call for artists that is out in the world right now. So we've got Monmouth Arts, Artworks Trenton, Wheaton Arts and Cultural Center, and Perkins Center for the Arts. And we'll talk a little bit more kind of about the differences between what these CBOs are looking for as we move through the program. So our project goals really are to utilize art to communicate with New Jersey communities about the risks of coastal flooding and how they can learn and be more resilient in the face of climate change. We know that there are lots of different people in the state of New Jersey, and some may not be coming to environmental messages because they're spending a lot of their time engaging with the arts. Others might be really engaged in environmental causes and not have a real exposure to the arts. But we know that we can communicate with folks through the arts in new ways and capture their attention. So using the arts to communicate ideas to communities is really the major goal of this program. In addition, we want to provide opportunities for artists. We want to provide opportunities for artists to get paid, but also to work with communities and to work with community organizations and show their art. So for us, this is the perfect way to do both of these things. So who is eligible? We get this question frequently. You have to be an adult visual artist, meaning over the age of 18, because you will have to sign contracts. You have to live in the state of New Jersey or within 100 miles of the state border, because we know that artists cross the state borders to Pennsylvania, New York, and Delaware all the time. But also because some of these coastal areas that are impacted by coastal flooding are along those borders. You can apply as an individual artist, or you can apply as a team. You can apply as an individual artist and then engage other artists in your project with you. However, the funding that's available is the funding that's available. So if you are a team, you will have to figure out between yourselves how to divide that funding up. How to apply. So the application process is all done online through callforentry.org. Callforentry.org, if you haven't used it before, is free for artists to use. You set up an account for yourself. You upload images of your work. The call itself is housed on callforentry.org, and there is a button on there that says apply, and you would click that button and follow through the process steps that are outlined there. We're going to look at some of the application pages in a moment here, but I do want to stress that the deadline is midnight on Tuesday, September 5th in Cafe. Here's the inside fact for folks who tuned in for our webinar. Cafe is located on Mountain Time, so while I don't encourage you to wait until the very last minute, it's actually midnight Mountain Time, not midnight Eastern Time. So you will get a few extra minutes there at the end if we need them. We are not able to offer any extensions on the deadline for folks who just can't get it together in time. And that is because our jury has to review every single submission that comes in and have meetings and make decisions about the artist. So we need to leave some time for that to happen, and then for the selected artists to work with their CBOs. You can only submit one proposal, so I'm going to encourage you to submit your best idea. So our CBOs are the potential art locations, and we get this question a lot. Where are the potential art locations? What you see here on the right side is the Cafe call in Cafe. That's literally a screen capture, and where that big red arrow is pointing, it says view site details. If you click on the view site details link, it will open up a document that describes where each of our 4 CBOs have told us that they are hoping the artist will propose work. So Artworks Trenton said there are a number. I'm going to ask you to mute yourself, please. Thank you. Artworks Trenton has proposed Trenton City Parks. There are a number of them. They're hoping that the selected artist would find one that really appeals to them or is absolutely appropriate for the proposed work. Monmouth Arts has selected the Monmouth Beach Cultural Center for the final installation of the work. Perkins Center for the Arts has identified a number of potential locations in Morristown. They are all outdoors locations. And Wheaton Arts has an amazing, 45-acre campus, and they are hoping that the selected or that the proposals that are specific to their location are centered on installing a piece or doing the work on Wheaton's campus. I'm sure we will have more questions about those locations. We can ask the CBOs themselves at the end of the PowerPoint. We'll open up for questions. So how to apply? Again, you're going to want to go into Cafe. Cafe is going to have some information, and then it's going to say apply. And if you click the apply button, what you're going to see looks like these 2 screen captures here. We're going to ask you to give us a brief bio. We don't want you to upload a resume. We want you to type a paragraph or so in there, you know, who you are and a little bit about your background in working with arts and working in the public and your exhibition history, kind of your brief bio, so we have a sense of who you are. Then you're going to be asked a series of questions. Which CBO are you interested in working with? You can select all, or you can select one in particular. We're going to ask you some demographic questions because we're always trying to do a better job of reaching more New Jerseyans with our arts calls. And the only way we can know we're doing that well is to ask you to tell us who you are. And then you're going to be able to upload a document. We're going to ask you to upload a document of no more than 2 pages, which generally speaking tells us what your great idea is for your art installation. I'm going to encourage you to use who, what, when, where, and how in that 2-page document. And to understand that because we're not paying you, we don't expect you to draft a full-on extra detailed proposal that has everything nailed down. We also expect that when you're working with the CBO, if you are the selected artist, you're going to need to stay flexible. There may be things that you're hoping can happen that can't happen. Maybe you can't get a permit to do something in the place that you think is the ideal place to do it. Or, maybe the flooring isn't going to be appropriate for dance in the way that you hoped it would. So make sure that your proposal leaves room for you to work in partnership with your CBO partner to make the best piece that you possibly can. I'm also going to encourage you to refer to any images or other support materials that you've uploaded in Cafe and how they can support your proposal. So if you've done a quick sketch idea, mention in your written proposal, take a look at quick sketch idea number 2 that's uploaded for an idea of what this could look like. Make sure that your narrative and any images or other materials you upload or link to connect to one another to really support your proposal. You can provide no more than 8 work samples or examples, no matter how you do it. You can upload them in Cafe. You can link something into your narrative document if you like. But because of the number of applications we expect to receive, our panel can't view more than 8 supplementary materials in whatever form they are. So don't upload 27 things. Don't send us to your website and expect we're going to spend 7 hours looking at every single detailed image that's there. Understand that we really want to see a proposal. We want to see images or other support materials that connect to it, but we're going to have a lot of things we're going to be looking at. So send us the best. Send us the things that make the most sense for the proposal you're submitting. So the budget. There is a $12,000 stipend available to the artists, which will be administered through their partnership with the CBO. What that means is you'll sign a contract with the community organization, and you will be essentially contracted or commissioned by them to do this project. That $12,000 is the full budget available for commissioning the artist. So that should include your artist fees, supplies and materials, travel. If you need to stay overnight somewhere to do an installation, lodging should be included. We want to make sure that you know up front that you should be planning a proposal that works within that budget. That doesn't mean there aren't potential other ways the CBOs could support you. For instance, one of our CBOs has said there's a possibility they could house someone if needed for a day or two, for installation. Maybe you need access to a photocopy machine and they could help you make 200 copies and they won't charge you for those. If you need that kind of support, put that in your proposal so that as our community partners are looking at these proposals, they can know if it's doable or not. Maybe you want access to a copy machine and 1,000 copies, but you don't realize that CBO doesn't have a copy machine, or it costs them a lot of money and they're not willing to do that. Hopefully they would make some copies for you, but maybe not 10,000 copies. So just be clear about what non-monetary other kinds of support you may need. So I want to take a minute here and kind of talk about what makes a great proposal for this program. Every year we get some proposals from amazing artists who make incredible artwork and do not speak at all about what they would do with the community to engage on issues of climate resilience or coastal flooding. And those are never approved because one of our main goals here is to engage with the community. So I'm going to encourage you as you're thinking about your proposal, as you are putting together that narrative, to be really clear how the community is going to engage with you and your artwork. So don't tell us you're going to make great work, you're going to drop it off and they're going to hang it in their window. That's not going to be a successful proposal. Think about ways that you could engage with the community, and that could be things like working with the Boys and Girls Club in the community, teaching classes, literally working with community members to make the art in some way, and put that information into your proposal so the CBOs can get a sense of how you're engaging with your community. Many of the community organizations have offered to help make those connections for the right artist, meaning they could schedule a class or a workshop in their facility for you with folks that are already engaged with them, meaning they could make connections to other community organizations they already work with, like the Boys and Girls Club or a local senior center. But really, that community engagement piece is key and critical. we're not going to move forward with any projects that aren't engaging with the community, because that is the major goal of the program. So I'm going to talk just briefly about a couple examples of different ways that visual artists have engaged on climate resilience and coastal flooding themes. And then I'm going to turn it over to Steph, who's going to talk about some examples of performing artists who have done this kind of work. We don't expect and we don't want you to copy any of these projects, but I want to take a moment and talk about the different ways that community was engaged with these artists in some of these projects. So for instance, Washed Ashore here, that's the one on the upper left-hand side by Angela Helstein Posey. She literally walked the shores with volunteers and community members to collect debris to create the sculptures. Now, this obviously is more about litter and plastic and waste in our oceans. However, the fact was that she worked really closely with the community to collect all of these materials and put these works together, and really made people think more clearly about the plastics that they were using and how they were being disposed of or recycled. One of my favorite pieces to talk about here is the one on the lower middle piece, Xavier Cortada's piece, Underwater HOA. This artist worked in a development in South Florida, started what they call the Underwater HOA, where they meet once a month, and it's residents from this development, and they talk about climate resilience and coastal flooding in particular. This artist did the math of how many feet of sea level rise would it take for these homes to be underwater. And then all of the homes have these signs out front. They're the same as those like real estate agent signs that you see, but it tells you how many feet of rising water it would take for that home to be completely flooded and underwater. And this entire neighborhood had these signs out for a period of time, so that even the folks who weren't directly engaged in those monthly meetings to talk about climate resilience, it could hit home for them that their house could be next. And I thought that was a really effective way and a fairly low budget project to drive some of those issues home and to engage with the community directly. Steph, do you want to take it away for a few minutes and give us some highlights on ways performing artists have engaged with these issues?
Sure. Thanks, Danielle. Hi, everybody. Steph Nurback here from the State Arts Council. So, yes, performing artists can do this work as well, and they have and do it. So these are just a few examples of some projects that have fascinated me that involve performance or performing artists. One here is a project called the Mermaid Tear Factory by an artist of the name Elizabeth Dowd. She's a Miami-based artist with a background in writing and performing, and she has a serious commitment to climate issues. So her particular work, called Mermaid Tear Factory, has been described as a roving sea garbage performance. She plays a really engaging character named Siren Jones, who sits on top of a trashy throne. It's pulled by a bicycle, and it roves through the community or through the space, the festival, wherever it may be. She's a contemporary mermaid who protests pollution and teaches people diction and dances and sells them the magic potion, which is actually her tears. So she engages through her performance and teaches through her performance. Another one that is a site-specific dance performance that I find to be really lovely is called King Tide Shoreline. This has been focused in the Hayward region of California, put together by a group called Nina Haft and Company. And the performance explored resilience of local watersheds and the shoreline specific to that area. And it stretched along a 2.5-mile preserve of bay wetlands in that area. So it was immersive in the performance. Folks came out to see it and walked it or strolled it along with the performers. And all of the performances were followed by a community gathering and conversations about the local impacts of climate change. Another one called Jalou Bayou, created by an interdisciplinary artist, Monica Jahan Bose. This one relates to climate change and the impacts on low-lying, impoverished areas specifically, and sort of on an international level, really. This piece has been performed in various U.S. coastal communities and also the artist's native coastal Bangladesh. And the intention is to raise awareness of climate change and link international coastal communities that face the same devastation due to rising sea levels. There's an example here of a large, very expensive project called Haloscenes. This was directed and conceived by an artist of the name Lars John. And it's a suite of multi-format artworks, and they sort of manifest this idea of drowning. It's been cited in public spaces all over the globe, and features a sculptural aquarium that stands 13 feet high. And it has the capacity to be flooded and drained with a hydraulic system, and a cast of rotating characters step inside this this aquarium and perform these everyday activities and actions, and the water rises and falls while they do it. It's fascinating. If you have a chance to look it up, it's just fascinating in general. It is an example that's way outside the scope of what we're doing here, except that it's also an example of how much research and how much can be involved in projects like this and how compelling they can be. And then the last thing, I just wanted to focus on theater for a second. There's a collaboration between two organizations, one in the US and one in Canada, and they put together something called the Climate Change Theater Action. And this image is from a festival that someone had presented in Santa Barbara, California. The Climate Change Theater Action works like this. Every other year, 50 accomplished playwrights are commissioned, and they represent a variety of cultures around the world. They're commissioned to write 5-minute plays about an aspect of climate crisis. And then they become this collection of plays that are made available to potential organizers interested in presenting at an event in their own communities. So events could range from something as simple as like an intimate reading of the plays. It could be larger public performances, radio shows, podcasts, film adaptations of the plays. Really, the possibilities are pretty endless here. The point is that these ideas from these plays, or these plays themselves, become the springboard for more creative innovation and connection between communities and artists. So really, these are just wild examples of all the places you can go and the ways that you could engage research and engage communities with that work. So there you have it. Back to you, Danielle.
Thank you, Steph, and thanks for choosing such compelling and interesting performing arts examples for us to look at today. So how will selections be made? We do have a jury. It is composed of someone from each of the community-based organizations participating, Arts Council staff and staff at the DEP, who will review every single submission. They will all independently, in some cases make comments, and in other cases decide they don't need to make comments, but they will score the submissions. Those scores are then averaged, and we take a look from the top down to do our matchmaking. Some of the criteria that will be used include: how clear is your proposal? Can we read it and understand what you're asking to do? Is it a feasible proposal? If you tell me you want to make a life-size solid gold statue for $12,000, I'm going to tell you that's not a feasible proposal. So really think about, something that's doable. Are the CBOs interested and able to partner with you on the project that you propose? If you want to do that life-size solid gold statue, but the CBO has clearly expressed they're not interested in sculpture, that's not going to be a match that's going to get made in heaven here. We're gonna, they're going to go in a direction not including sculpture because they've told us they weren't interested in sculpture. Is it safe? Is it environmentally friendly? These dollars are federal dollars that come through the State Department of Environmental Protection, and there are things you are not able to do with them. So, you know, making sculptures on the beach is likely not a go because we have to get federal approval, and beaches are one of the areas they're very concerned about not seeing any kind of impact from this work. How much experience does the artist have in doing work in public places? We do want to ensure that the artists who are ultimately selected not only have great ideas, but have the capacity and ability to undertake the work. We want to set everybody up for success here. We want to make sure that the community is going to have positive, thoughtful interactions with the work. Something that's really transgressive or aggressive is not necessarily something that we want to fund with this particular project, because we want these communities to be engaged and have positive interactions with the artists and the artwork. Will it further the goals of our program? Does it actually talk about climate resilience and coastal flooding? If it's an amazing artwork proposal, but it doesn't deal with those themes at all, that's probably going to count against it. This is our timeline. We made the call for our artists public on July 27th. The submission deadline is September 5th, so you still have some time. No later than October 30th, we will notify everyone who applied the outcomes of their submission. And then beginning in November, the CBOs and the artists will start to work together. You'll have conversations, you'll have meetings, you'll figure out a plan, you'll figure out a timeline. The idea is that we want to see these art installations, projects, community events, all of the things happening in 2024 between the spring and the fall. It really depends on the location and the artists, what that timing exactly looks like, but we think that's a great time to be engaging with communities. People tend to be outside more, they're going to gather in these locations more. It also gives the artists and the community partners plenty of time to get all their ducks in a row and put the project together. So how to get help? And yes, we are going to get to questions next, but I just want to point out here that callforentry.org is the online platform. If you are having trouble using Cafe, I'm going to ask you to reach out to Cafe for help. They actually have a great website where they have videos, they have FAQs, they've got an email address that you can address your questions to. The reason I'm sending you to them to get help with that platform is I can't help you. It's not our platform. We don't have access to the back end of things they do. So for instance, if you're struggling to upload images, it might be that it's too big. They'll be able to tell you what the size limits are because it's their platform. If you have questions regarding this opportunity, you want more details on something, you need a, something more refined answer than we get here today, please reach out to Steph or myself. I'm going to ask you not to contact any of the community organizations directly. And I've asked them, if you contact them, to send you to us, because we want to make sure that everybody's getting the same information and it becomes a really fair process for all of the artists. So our information is here. Feel free to write it down. It's also in the call for entry. If you've made it to this Zoom, I'm betting that you already have this information somewhere or access to it. And last but not least, we're gonna turn over to the questions and answer portion of this webinar. With us today, we have Marcos, Teresa, Susan, Alexandria, Alexander, and potentially Becky from the DEP. So we've got folks from most of our CBOs here who are going to be able to answer questions. Oh, and Addison is here too. Okay, great. So we have all of our CBOs represented here today. That is great news. We have things in the chat. Start there. Someone asked, do the locations for the art change each year? And the answer is yes, because the locations are selected through an independent process that the DEP undertakes. It's a grant process. So organizations apply for the funding and express their interest in being considered. After those CBRs are selected, then we issue our call for artists because we want to know what they are looking for in terms of artists. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I think we have about 30 people in the room here today. So let's see if we can do the chaos method, being kind and gentle to one another. If you have a question, you could raise your hand or you can unmute and speak. And if we start talking over each other, then we're going to enforce the raise the hand question method.
We are getting also a couple of extra questions in the chat. We're getting a pretty good amount of questions in the chat. The first one I just wanted to mention too real quick was Julia had a question to start off pretty early in the session, which is the artwork project going to all locations or just one? And the answer is essentially keep in mind there's one artist or one artist team that is matched with one CBO. So we're essentially looking for 4 artists or artist teams to be matched with one CBO.
Question in the chat. Do any of our CBOs have outdoor video projection capabilities? I'm going to ask if any of our CBOs have a response to that.
That was my question.
I'll start it off. Perkins does not have it yet, but we're happy to try to accommodate as best as possibly can. So.
And I can answer Monmouth Arts does not.
And Wheaton does not either. But again, if there's some creative solution, we would certainly try to work towards.
Yes. How long is the art? Oh, sorry.
Yep, Artworks Trenton as well. We don't have the capabilities right now, but if you have some innovative way that we can do that, we can probably make it happen.
And I have to say the same then. Yes.
Oh my God. Can I ask a follow-up?
Sure.
Okay. So do these artworks need to be durational of a certain amount of time? Like, or could I say, oh, we'll do a projection 7 nights in a row, that kind of thing? Yeah.
It's pretty open. I would say you could do either. It will partially depend on perhaps what the CBO already has scheduled. I think that you would work with the CBO on sort of how long and where it is projected. But I would certainly encourage you to put in your proposal what you think would be best and work best for you. And then if you are selected, you would work with that CBO to see if that could work or if there are, adjustments that might be requested.
So if I were to say to all of the CBOs, and then you guys on your end would say, okay, we're going to put this person with the one that meets best. Okay.
Yeah, and the one that was most excited about it and the one that it made the most sense to work with.
All right, thank you.
So next question, can the projects be traveling as shared within the community, including schools and youth groups? I'll give a quick answer, and then if any CBOs have something else they want to say in response, feel free to unmute and do that. Lenny, I think the short answer is we have had some projects do that in the past. That said, it was a CBO who specifically said they wanted a project that did that and was going to several locations. I don't think any of the CBOs would necessarily be against that. Given if you look at the site details, most of them are saying outdoor locations within their community. But I'm going to ask the CBOs if I'm not telling the truth, or if you want to elaborate, feel free to unmute and answer that question in more detail.
Go ahead. I think Wheaton, our goal is really to activate our campus and bring the community in. We wouldn't be opposed to it. It would just really depend on the request, but we have the capacity to host quite a few people. So I'll leave it.
For Artworks Trenton, we could do both in-house and travel. We work with so many different organizations and schools within Trenton that, yeah, it most certainly can happen.
Yeah, Monmouth Arts would not be opposed to that at all.
And Perkins Center for the Arts is also happy to host on-site as well as out in the community. Very similar type of relationship. We have a 5-acre campus in one location, a smaller campus in Collingswood, and many community partners with whom we work. So we're flexible as well.
Mm.
That's a great group of people at these CBOs. Thank you, guys. That was a great elaboration on the answer. Crystal wants to know who is on the jury. A bunch of people who are actually in this meeting. The jury is representatives from each of the CBOs, in addition to representatives from the Department of Environmental Protection and the State Arts Council. Susan, I have a question here that is specific for Wheaton. Are there any indoor locations on the Wheaton campus?
There are actually. And again, it would depend on what the project is. One of the spaces I thought of right away is we have an old schoolhouse that is back by the pond that we have, the lake, I should call it. And we have used that for installations. It's not one where people can walk through. It's one that they can stand and view something. But there are potentially others, again, depending on the project. Alex, I don't know if you want to say
Yeah,
anything.
I was thinking about this too. You know, I thought maybe a good idea would be to look at our website. We do have a campus map that shows what some of the, I mean, kind of at least shows like a footprint of what some of the different things are. And then I'd also encourage, you know, if candidates are local to visit.
Great, thank you. Those are good answers. So the chat is apparently the place to put questions at this point. It is blowing up. We'll read a few more of those, and then I think we are going to go to the raise your hand if you want to do a voice question so that I don't lose track of you, because I don't see everybody on my screen at this moment. So someone asked, would it make more sense to do a very broad application so that it could be placed with any CBO, or would an application be stronger if it was specific to a specific CBO? I don't know that I can answer that question. I think it depends. If you have an idea for an amazing artwork that could work at multiple locations, then submit that and multiple locations can consider it. But if your work is really specific and it requires access to a particular community or particular resources or a location in the state, then you want to make sure that you identify that organization, that CBO, as the one that you're hoping to work with. So we're going to leave that one up to you. I don't think there's an advantage either way. I think it depends on what you're proposing. So oh, go ahead.
I do think it is worth saying, though, also in the CAFE application system, you do have you have a choice of sort of saying which CBOs you think your project or proposal is most appropriate for, or you're most interested in working with these particular CBOs, or that you're open to any of them. And I think it would be okay to note somewhere in your application that there is a sense that my proposal, although I'm open to any, I think it may be most suited for this particular organization. I think it's okay to just say, hey, I'm not sure, but this is what I'm thinking. We'll go with you. We'll work with that.
Thanks, Steph. So next question on visual arts, do the artworks need to be permanent or temporary? This program is designed for temporary works. I don't think that with the budget that we have, commissioning of permanent works is a reasonable expectation. And I think that all of our community partners are expecting this to be a temporary project-based undertaking. Okay, so someone asked, do the CBOs have climate professionals as part of the event? My first answer is they could, if that's what you ask for and they're able to, you know, bring someone to that kind of event. But I also, yep, I see Addison, you've unmuted. I was going to point, I know we have at least 2 CBOs that could make some professional connections as well. Go ahead, Addison.
Oh, yeah, so we're actually working with the Watershed Institute, which is in Pennington, New Jersey, but they are well-versed in climate change and most of the waterways that are within Mercer County and most of the state, but specifically Mercer County. So yes, we have connections.
And Wheaton also has very strong partner, Citizens United for the Maurice River. Not only do they have a lot of expertise, but they have a network of expertise. So it would be very possible.
Thank you both. And actually, I feel like I know Perkins has identified some local community groups that are engaged in, climate topics. And I know that Monmouth Arts, you want to talk about your connection to the planning office in Monmouth County?
Yeah, we have a really strong connection with Monmouth County Division of Planning. And also, I was just speaking to the mayor of Monmouth Beach, and he's connecting me to various organizations within the town. So yeah, we do too have strong connections.
All right, so I think we've gone through the chat questions. Does anyone want to raise their hand and be able to unmute and ask questions that way? Maybe this means we did a really excellent job. There aren't many questions. Oh, okay.
Mm.
Go
Hi.
ahead.
Thank you so much. I guess one of my questions is around, understanding that an individual artist or artist team may apply. But I also have curiosities if part of an artist practice is very much like an aspect of their artistic practice is also curatorial in nature, and that they would bring in potentially other people too, like wouldn't necessarily be part of the core, but would be kind of support as well, like as a project develops, like depending on what a project needs, as it's like kind of revealed in the collaboration with the community, and just wondering about how that is looked upon. I guess that's one question. Maybe that's a little vague, and I can perhaps like clarify more if needed, but
I'm gonna relate it to a previous year where actually Teresa and Monmouth Arts worked with a choreographer who choreographed an entire, multiple suites of dance that became somewhat of a festival. I mean, Teresa, do you want to talk about that? Because there were many
Yeah.
artists that choreographer
Oh.
ended up bringing in.
Yeah, she did a beautiful live dance presentation in Long Branch and brought in many different dancers from across New Jersey. I think, even Pennsylvania, she brought them in, and she was responsible for handling their payment. So we gave them, the chunk of the funding, and she was responsible to pay them. So yeah, she brought in quite a can't even remember how many people were there, but there were a lot of people she brought into the
Costume
show.
designers and costume creators.
It was
and-
beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So hopefully, Dunya, that sort of addresses, I think it's somewhat different, but somewhat the same, right?
yeah, very much so. I appreciate that.
Sure.
And just wanting to just a follow-up question, if I may. So in the proposal of that person, right, they didn't necessarily definitively know who those collaborators might be. Like I would guess that some of that became revealed in process, in relationship with community, in research, etc. So just curiosities about like how that lived in the proposal space, and how that, if that still felt like, oh, okay, we feel grounded enough with this artist and what they're kind of proposing to build out. And I guess maybe just curiosities about how that was considered in the application process.
Sure. So first I'll say that if you look at our CBOs, it's all art people. Every single person engaged in this process, from our CBOs and the Arts Council staff, has a pretty strong understanding of, the arts and curatorial practices and those sort of things. So I think you could come in and understand that you don't have to go really, really deep in explaining what it is, because everyone in the room knows what it is. I do think that having a really strong concept is going to be important, so that all of these, jurors and CBO representatives can understand what it is you're trying to accomplish and how you intend to do so. I think the who and the really specific nuts and bolts could be unveiled as you move into your work with them. You think about Fred Wilson, who goes and is this, to a museum and is told, please take our collection and curate something. Right. So that, I think we all have a pretty clear understanding that you're not going to know exactly what the outcome is going to be, but you have a sense of this is why we're doing it. This is the lens he's looking at this practice through. This is the space that he'll use and the length of time. I would imagine, something similar could be appropriate. Teresa, do you have any recollection on like the proposal versus the finished project from the choreography engagement?
I don't really remember, but I think flexibility is the name of the game. Even when we did it the first time, we had planned Asbury Park. It didn't work out. So we switched it to Long Branch. They handled it beautifully. So yeah, it just the artist has to be very flexible, because sometimes things just don't work out as planned. But we're supporting the artist all the way through. So if something didn't work out, we were there to help them to navigate. It's especially the live performance. It did bring up certain issues, but there's something to note.
Yeah.
And I might suggest that in a proposal in which you are sort of imagining what could be and you're not totally clear on an outcome, that's probably going to be most proposals, but it might be useful to suggest an example of how you see curation to potentially go for you, that might let the readers of the proposal into your own process and how you typically like to work, or how you would imagine working in a particular situation. Like if something came up where it involved, you found out that there was a particular demographic of that community that might really benefit from someone that is in your wheelhouse of expertise, then you would want to bring that person in to help address those issues, that sort of thing.
Thank you, Steph. Other
Danielle, I have a
questions?
question.
Great, let's hear it.
Thank you. I didn't see where to raise my hand on this, but thank you. So I'm a visual artist. I make paintings and I do sculpture projects. And so my projects are anything but temporary. And so would there be a place for an actual object as a result of my project proposal, for that object to live into perpetuity as a learning device or learning tool?
That's a good question. My answer will be marginally open-ended. As I said before, this really is a project-based, temporary project-themed undertaking here. I also don't think that most of our CBOs have expressed an interest. And if you look at the site details, they've kind of told you what they're thinking about. And I don't recall any of them saying, we really want something left behind. We actually expect the artist will take with them what they make, right? That's kind of part of the deal here. So if creating a sculpture is part of your proposal, you might consider where you could put it ultimately at the end, whether it's reselling it or donating it to a place. If you are working with a community organization, maybe our CBO connects you with a senior community that has a fountain, and you decide with the seniors there, you want to create something that lives in their fountain. There is that kind of potential, but I would not give any blanket statement that says, yes, you could create something and leave it behind, because ultimately that will be up to you and the CBO to decide. But it isn't something that we're going to say from the outset we would expect. We would expect the opposite.
Okay, thank you, Danielle.
Sure. So it sounds like a couple people would be open to it based on what I see in the chat. Either way, right? So someone else asked, would it be the opposite? Could they bring a piece and then take it back? Sounds like our CBOs are open to that, but it would really depend on the proposal itself. There's also a question about how detailed the budget should be in the proposal. We're not asking for a line-by-line budget. We're asking you to have considered if the dollars provided will sustain your project. I don't think any of our CBOs wants to engage with an artist who halfway through runs out of money because they underestimated the cost of plaster, or because they didn't realize how much gas and tolls were going to cost them to drive back and forth from their location to the CBO location. So spend enough time in terms of putting your proposal budget together to feel really, really, really confident that the dollars are there to do what you want to do and for you to get paid. So consider that as you're developing your proposal. You don't have to write out, every single paperclip cost, how much, one trip across the Ben Franklin Bridge is. I think you need to put in there, this is my travel and lodging. These are materials and supplies for the project, and perhaps outline in general what they are. Here's your artist fee. If you are engaging with other artists, maybe what percentage of the budget you're setting aside to ensure that they're getting paid, those kind of things. There is no standard budget format we're asking you for. You could put, sort of in that who, what, when, where, and how piece. It could sit in the how piece. I'm going to spend this much money on supplies and this much on travel because it's going to take me this many trips. And also it's worth noting, some of the CBOs might be reimbursing you for materials rather than giving you all the dollars up front. That would be something you would work out with them as you are, putting your contract together. They are being reimbursed by the DEP after the fact. They need to provide receipts and things like that. So again, with the solid gold life-size statue that this budget will absolutely not support, keep that in mind too as you're putting together your proposal. You can't buy all your solid gold up front and then expect to get, reimbursed the next day. Try to think about those kind of things. Dunya, you have another question?
Thank you so much. I just,
Sure.
Just around considerations around accessibility and just particular, just wanting to know where information around the kind of like information with the different organizations around accessibility, things that should be kept in mind. Also just ways that like, disability justice is being centered and just like all of that kind of thing. If folks could speak to that, that would be appreciated.
Sure, I could ask each of our CBOs to speak to that, and I could preface it by saying that all of these CBOs are actually happen to be grantees of the State Arts Council, and we do require our grantees to do an ADA self-assessment as well as to have a patron-centered grievance policy around accessibility. So I think that you'll find all of them are pretty well versed in being able to speak to this. Would any of the CBO reps like to give a brief discussion on that?
Sure. As Danielle said, we have an ADA plan and have worked really hard to create an accessible campus. Probably not perfect, but if we do anything on campus, like on a temporary, a temporary project, it's always in our mind, like in part of the development. I wasn't sure I even really heard the question right. We also have a general page on our website that you could check.
I would also say, just to chime into that, because our campus is pretty big, and like we have a museum and buildings that are, do our best to be ADA accessible and compliant, but it would also be a partial responsibility of the artist to kind of work with the site in a way that considers those things, because there's a lot of places that are unbuilt.
And yeah, we have a wooded campus, a large part of it where there is opportunity, but that would have to be part of the collaboration, I think, between Wheaton and the chosen artists. And safety in general,
Yeah, this Perkins Center for the Arts has a similar situation as Wheaton. We have two locations. Both locations are early 1900s buildings, one of which is protected under the New Jersey Historic Trust and the New Jersey and National Historic Registries. So we do have some constraints, but as Danielle mentioned, being a grantee of the state, we do have an ADA plan in place that works with both the physical structures as well as engagement levels of all of our participants. Really taking into consideration disabilities of all kinds, whether they be physical, cognitive, or other. So this would be an ongoing discussion with the artists in terms of creating artwork or creating installations or creating exhibitions or performances that would be accessible, and how we can help meet the accessibility needs there. So I would just say it would be an ongoing conversation.
And I have to say for Monmouth Arts, we would be working with the Cultural Center to ensure that the artwork is accessible. But it is a top priority for Monmouth Arts for all our programming and events. So we also have an ADA plan. So, yeah.
And same for Artworks Trenton. We are ADA compliant. We do have an ADA plan, and we're also housed in a city building. So it's kind of twofold for us that we have to be.
Thank you, Junior, for that astute question, and thanks to all the CBOs for absolutely knowing the answer. This is why you guys are so good at what you do. So do we have other verbal questions that folks want to pose at this point? Don't have to raise your hand. It seems like we're not talking over each other. You could just unmute. Well, it's 1:29, and I promised this would be, from 12:30 to 1:30. So I guess we've done our job well. If you have follow-up questions, if you're eating dinner tonight, and you're like, oh, I should have asked this, or tomorrow in the shower, that's when I always have my wish I had done the day before kind of thoughts. Please feel free to reach out to Steph and myself. Email is probably the best way to get in touch with us, but you can certainly call us as well. We will respond to your questions, and if it means we have to reach out to one of our CBO representatives to get the answer, we will certainly do that. Thank you all for your time today. I want to especially thank the representatives from our community organizations. You guys gave up your lunch hour to be here today and answer all of these great questions. So thank you for that. And with that, I'll tell everybody, have a great weekend, and we hope to see your amazing proposals by September 5th. Take care.